They made fun of her age, dumped water on her head, and called her names, until one clean punch from the quiet old woman knocked out the gym's youngest fighter, and left the whole room frozen, wondering who she really was. Tucked deep in small town Indiana, not far from the rusted train tracks and faded diners, sat a place where pain was tradition and pride came before everything. The sign out front read, "Iron House Boxing," and inside it smelled like sweat, chalk, and yesterday's blood. It wasn't just a gym. It was a kingdom of punches, a hangout for ex-fighters, loudmouths, and local boys who thought muscle made them untouchable. Grunts echoed through the open space as gloves slammed into heavy bags. Rap music blared over cheap speakers. Coaches shouted instructions through mouthfuls of energy drinks. Mirrors were smudged with fingerprints, and posters of legends, Ali, Tyson, Foreman, hung crooked on the walls like aging gods. That afternoon, the doors creaked open, and someone who didn't belong walked in. She was old, 70, maybe more, gray, hair tied back into a tight ponytail, baggy sweatpants, faded sweatshirt, and a duffel bag that looked like it hadn't seen the light of day since Reagan was president. At first no one said anything. They just stared, blinking, confused, curious. Then came the laughter. A few snickers at first, then full-blown chuckles. One guy leaned over to another and whispered, "Is this a joke?" A group of younger boxers sitting by the speed bag started filming on their phones. The captions practically wrote themselves. "Granny's here for fight. Night. Senior citizen workout time." She didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. She walked straight to the front desk, filled out the liability waiver with a calm hand, and handed it back like it was the most normal thing in the world. Her name? Lena. But they didn't bother with that. Someone in the back joked, "Yo, we got the fabulous Moolah in the house," referencing the old pro wrestling legend. The nickname stuck. Moolah, that's what they called her now. Old Moolah. Every time she walked in, that name followed like gum on a shoe. Still, she didn't respond. She just changed her shoes, laced up her gloves, and moved to an empty corner. No warm-up speech, no asking for help. She started shadowboxing. Her form wasn't flashy. No spinning, bouncing, or YouTube-style footwork. But her movements were clean, sharp, focused. Each punch sliced the air like she still remembered something the others hadn't yet learned. Most ignored her. Some laughed. One coach rolled his eyes and walked away. But she kept coming back. Every morning at 6 a.m., she was there before the doors officially opened. While others were still waking up, she was stretching on the floor, knuckles taped, shoes tied tight. Some figured she was just lonely. Others assumed she was bored and wanted to feel young again. But no one noticed her eyes. They didn't catch that slow, steady stare she gave the ring each morning, like she was remembering something, or waiting for it to come back. Nobody asked why she trained. Nobody asked what brought her here. Because in this place, answers didn't matter as much as the image. Iron House wasn't built on kindness. It was built on proving who was the toughest, loudest, or strongest. And in a gym full of testosterone and attitude, an old woman in sweatpants was just something to laugh at. But what they didn't realize, what none of them could have guessed, was that this wasn't the first gym she'd ever stepped into, and it definitely wasn't the first time people had underestimated her. To them, she was a joke with arthritis, but in reality, They'd just welcomed a lion into the cage. They saw sweatpants and wrinkles. What they didn't see was the storm she'd been holding back for years. And soon, someone was going to feel it firsthand. It didn't take long for her to become the gym's favorite joke. Every time Lena walked through the doors of Iron House, eyes followed her, not with respect, but with smirks. She wasn't treated like a member, she was treated like a walking meme. Someone to film, someone to laugh at, someone whose best days had clearly passed a lifetime ago. From the corners of the gym, young fighters whispered and laughed under their breath. Some even took turns filming her workouts, slow, stiff, methodical. The videos ended up online within minutes, with captions like, "Cardio for the coffin," "When Grandma wants one last fight before heaven," Iron House's new mascot. And still she didn't react. One morning, as she stood in front of the heavy bag, someone poured cold water over her head. The room roared with laughter. Lena didn't move, didn't even wipe it off. She just kept punching. Left, right, left, right, slow, but with purpose. Her focus was unshakable. The rhythm of her punches didn't change. Her body may have aged, but something behind her eyes said she wasn't done yet. Some of the younger boxers started making bets on how many days she'd last. "Give her 3 more mornings, Max," one smirked. "She'll quit after the next shin splint." But she didn't. Every single day at 6 a.m., Lena was already in the gym, before the lights were fully on, before the coffee was brewed. She stretched her joints slowly, taped her fingers carefully, and warmed up in silence while the city outside was still asleep. The coaches didn't pay much attention. They figured she'd eventually disappear on her own. No one offered to train her. No one asked why she kept coming back, until Chase started getting involved. Chase was 23, shredded, sharp-jawed, undefeated in the amateur circuit, and the gym's golden boy. He hit hard, talked loud, and never skipped a mirror. He wasn't just confident, he was cocky to the bone. And when he noticed Lena, he didn't just laugh. He went out of his way to humiliate her. He'd shadow box 2 feet away from her, making exaggerated grunts. He'd mock her slow pace, bounce around like a clown pretending to pull his back mid-punch. "She moves like a broken vending machine," he told the others. But Lena said nothing. She never barked back, never defended herself. She just trained alone. Quiet, steady. Every morning, she hit the bag a little harder. Every week, her movements became tighter. The bruises on her knuckles deepened, and her breathing became more controlled. No one noticed that she'd added weight to her gloves. No one saw her doing bodyweight drills in the corner. No one knew she was rewiring her body in silence. To them, she was still old Moolah, the washed-up relic who didn't know when to quit. But behind every jab and cross, behind every stretch and every breath, there was a reason she kept showing up. Something deeper than fitness. Something more important than proving a point. She wasn't training for fun. She was training to feel alive again, to reclaim something she'd once lost. Something that had been taken from her, not just in the ring, but in life. And while the world saw wrinkles and wrist wraps, she saw something else entirely. A countdown, a return, a fire building behind her ribs. What they didn't know was this wasn't some old woman chasing youth. This was a fighter chasing something taken from her long ago, and she was almost ready to take it back. It was a Tuesday morning when the truth began to crack through. The gym was nearly empty, just the sound of a mop sliding across the floor. and the occasional creak of a locker door echoing through the back hallway. The janitor on duty that day, a quiet man named Mel, was finishing his shift when he noticed one locker slightly ajar. It wasn't fancy, just one of the older lockers tucked near the end, the kind that squeaked no matter how gently you closed it. Mel usually kept to himself, but something inside made him pause. He opened the locker to check for anything left behind. Inside was a single pair of hand wraps, a folded towel, and a small black and white photo, taped carefully to the back. While Mel leaned in. It was old, maybe 40 or 50 years back. The image was faded, curled at the corners, but clear enough to see what it was. A young woman, strong, confident, sweat on her brow, standing in the middle of a championship boxing ring. A trophy in one hand, the other hand raised in victory. She wasn't alone. On either side stood two well-known female boxers from the golden age of women's boxing. Names anyone with history in the sport would know. But what caught Mel's attention most wasn't the setting. It was the woman herself. He'd seen her before, right here in this gym, only older, slower, wrinkled and quiet. It was Lena. Same cheekbones, same eyes, even the same determined frown. He pulled the photo off the locker wall, turned it over, and found a name scribbled in blue ink. Lena Mae Carter, 1977. State title, Philadelphia. Mel carried the photo to the front of the gym and showed it to a younger trainer, expecting some kind of reaction. The trainer took one glance and scoffed. Probably fake. Those legends didn't train with nobodies. He tossed the photo on the counter and went back to wrapping gloves. But not everyone ignored it. One of the older coaches, Coach Reggie, a man who rarely spoke unless it was about footwork or form, picked up the photo and stared at it for a long time. He didn't say a word, didn't tell anyone what he knew, but deep down he recognized that face. He'd seen her fight years ago, before the headlines stopped covering women, before scandals buried promising careers, before names like Lena Carter were erased from the record books. She had once been a fighter to watch, a woman with fire in her fists and a jaw that didn't break easily. But then, she vanished. Coach Reggie remembered rumors about Lena calling out shady promoters, about fights being rigged, about women being underpaid, overworked, and silenced. When they spoke up, he remembered hearing that she'd refused a deal, gone public with her truth, and been blacklisted by every gym and promoter in the region. No fights, no sponsors, no recognition. She had disappeared, until now, and here she was, again in a broken-down gym in Indiana, training alone while kids laughed at her like she was some kind of joke. But she wasn't here for laughs. She wasn't here for cardio or attention. She was here for redemption. Not just to fight again, but to reclaim a name that had been stolen from her. For weeks, she had kept quiet, letting the world assume, letting the kids mock, letting the coaches overlook her. But behind every punch, behind every early morning, behind every drop of sweat, was purpose. She didn't need them to remember her. She came to remind them Lena Mae Carter wasn't just some old woman in sweatpants. She was a fighter trained by champions, a woman who once stood in rings while the crowd chanted her name, a fighter who got pushed out because she spoke up when others stayed silent. And now, she was back, not for revenge, for something deeper. She wasn't chasing fame or a rematch, she was chasing her own truth. And truth hits harder than any punch. The gloves she once hung up in silence, She was ready to lace them back on. And this time, she wasn't pulling any punches. A few days after the photo was found, the gym announced something it did once a year: Iron House Exhibition Night. It was their version of a local fight night. Part charity, part ego trip. Fighters could call each other out for quick exhibition matches. Tickets were sold, families came to watch, and the whole town got a front row seat to the gym's favorite fighters. Chase was the first to throw his name in. Of course he was. He had a new haircut, new gloves, and a swagger that only grew with every undefeated round. The second he heard about exhibition night, his eyes lit up, not because he wanted a real challenge, but because he wanted a spotlight. And then he looked across the gym and saw Lena. She was sitting on the edge of a bench, rewrapping her hands, slow and steady like always. Her wrists cracked softly with age, but her focus didn't waver. Chase grinned. "Put me down for a match," he told the front desk. "I want to fight old Moolah." The room paused, and then laughter. Louder than usual, one coach dropped his clipboard. Another. Fighters spat out water. Some thought he was joking. Others clapped like it was the best entertainment idea they'd heard in years. Lena didn't even blink. She looked up at him once, held his gaze for a beat, then nodded once and stood. No words, no emotion. And then she walked out of the gym. The match was officially on. For the next few days, the buzz in the gym was electric. Everyone had an opinion. "She's gonna get folded like laundry." "Someone's grandma is about to catch a hook." "She'd better bring a walker to the ring." The sign-up sheet went up. The posters were made. The name on the flyer read, "Chase versus Moolah, experience versus ego." But while the gym laughed and hyped it up like a circus act, Lena got to work in silence. She started staying late, coming in when the lights were low, when no one was watching. She brought out jump ropes, medicine balls, and resistance bands from her own old training stash. Her movements weren't fast, but they were sharp. She didn't waste energy. She knew exactly what to work on and where to push. She wasn't just training for survival. She was training for execution. One night, long after the gym had closed, she was running footwork drills by herself in the back corner when someone else walked in. Coach Diego. He was younger than Reggie, but old enough to remember when boxing still had soul. He'd watched Lena for weeks, seen the stares, the jokes, the disrespect. But he also saw something else: discipline that didn't quit. He didn't say much at first, just leaned on the ropes and watched her move. Finally, he spoke. "You're not here for the spotlight, are you?" She looked over at him and gave the slightest shake of her head. That was enough. From that night forward, Coach Diego started training her after hours. He didn't baby her. She wasn't treated like she was fragile. He trained her the same way her old coach once did. Drills in silence. Repetition until her muscles burned. Reaction timing with tennis balls. Punch counters. Heavy bag combinations were drilled with nothing but grunts and nods. The pair worked like a machine. No need for speeches. No time for doubts. Every bruise she picked up was a reminder. She wasn't done yet. Diego brought out the pads and pushed her footwork harder than the kids half her age. He didn't call her Moolah. He called her Carter because now he knew who she really was. As fight night got closer, whispers started to change. Some noticed she didn't flinch anymore. Some noticed she was hitting the bag cleaner faster. Her jab, still sharp. Her uppercut, coming back with a bite. Her balance? Like she never left? And Chase? He didn't train any differently. He still laughed, still strutted around the gym like it was his kingdom. He thought he was walking into a comedy act, but what he didn't realize was that he just challenged a storm in disguise. Fight night was supposed to be entertainment, a joke, a warm-up for the real show. But by the end of that night, it wouldn't be comedy they remembered. It would be history. The gym had never been louder. It was fight night at Iron House, and the place was packed wall to wall. Folding chairs circled the makeshift ring, and people leaned against every wall, phone cameras already rolling. Posters flapped from the ceiling. The room buzzed with laughter, anticipation, and cheap energy drinks. But this wasn't a real title match. This was supposed to be a comedy. The crowd came expecting to see a cocky young champ toy with a woman old enough to be his grandma. Some even wore wigs and fake glasses in the crowd to mimic her. One guy held a sign that said, "Moolah, take your meds." But Lena didn't flinch. She stood by her corner in worn gloves and a simple mouthguard. No flash, no glitter. Just a body that had been bruised by time and sharpened by memory. Across from her, Chase was soaking it all in. He danced in place, rolled his shoulders, and blew kisses to the crowd. He flexed his arms and even pulled a walker into the ring as a joke, pretending to trip on it while the audience howled. And then the bell rang. Round 1. Chase didn't come forward right away. He circled her like a lion toying with its prey. He threw light jabs inches from her face, never meant to land. Just to humiliate. The crowd laughed louder. "Come on, Granny," someone shouted. Lena stood perfectly still, eyes calm, shoulders relaxed, no flinching, no blinking, just watching, measuring, breathing. 30 seconds in, Chase lunged in for a fake hook, then backed off again with a grin. He didn't see what she saw. He didn't know what she'd been training for. He thought this was a game. And then it happened. One step forward, one twist of her hips, and from her left side came a hook, clean, quick, and brutally precise. Her glove didn't land with a crack. It landed with a thud that silenced the gym in an instant. Chase didn't stumble. He collapsed. His body hit the canvas like a sack of bricks, back flat, arms sprawled, eyes wide open, but completely blank. For a second, no one moved. Phones lowered. Laughter froze. The music cut off. Then the gym erupted. Gasps, screams. A few phones dropped. Medical staff jumped into the ring, kneeling by Chase's side. He was breathing, but out cold. It took a full minute to get him sitting up again, blinking in confusion, as if he had just woken from a dream or a nightmare. Lena stepped back to her corner, calm as ever, breathing through her nose, gloves lowered. She didn't raise her fists. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The entire room had already seen what they needed to see. The same people who laughed at her hours earlier now stared in disbelief. The old woman in sweatpants, the one they mocked, ignored, and underestimated, had just dropped their best fighter with one perfect punch. Coach Diego stood by the ropes, jaw tight, eyes proud. Coach Reggie? He smiled for the first time in years. And Chase? He didn't speak, not that night. Not the day after either. His pride had taken a blow harder than anything his chin had ever felt. No one called her Moolah anymore. No one poured water over her head, and no one dared laugh in her direction again. Because in that single moment, with one punch, She reminded them all that real strength isn't loud. It doesn't show off. It doesn't beg for respect. It earns it. But what really dropped that night wasn't just a young fighter. It was every assumption they had about age, power, and who deserves to be feared inside the ring. The comeback the world forgot by the next morning. The clip had already gone viral. A 30-second video shot from the front row. Grainy, shaky, but crystal clear where it mattered. An old woman standing in a boxing ring. A cocky young fighter dancing around her. One clean hook. One brutal knockout. The caption read, "Grandma Fighter KO's Gym Bro." By lunchtime, it had hit a millions views. By dinner, $5 million. By morning, it was on ESPN's highlight reel. Everyone was talking about her. Everyone was asking the same question. Who is she? At first, they only knew the nickname, Moolah. The internet ran wild. Memes flooded timelines. Reaction videos popped up within hours. People debated if it was staged. Some called it fake. But then, someone looked closer. A retired boxing journalist named Karen Bellamy, now writing a blog in Pennsylvania, paused the video on Lena's face. She recognized her. Not from the present, but from a forgotten past. She pulled an old program from her attic, the 1977 Eastern Women's Classic. There, on page 4, was a black and white photo of a young fighter, in red trunks, hand raised in victory. Her name, Lena Mae Carter. Karen posted the side-by-side photo online with a simple caption. "You're not looking at a lucky punch. You're looking at a silenced legend." That post lit a different kind of fire. Now it wasn't just a viral knockout. Now it was a rediscovery. Sports networks picked it up. Local news stations ran features. Podcasts, blogs, and even former fighters started digging deeper. And piece by piece, the real story came out. Lena Mae Carter wasn't just some grandma who wandered into a gym. She had been one of the fiercest female fighters of the late 70s and early 80s. Fast hands, sharp footwork, a left hook that was feared from New York to Nevada. She was on her way to a title shot, until she made the mistake of speaking the truth. Turns out, Lena had witnessed and reported a match-fixing scandal, a setup involving promoters, illegal betting, and paid judges. When she refused to take a dive and, worse, tried to expose it, she was blackballed. No more fights, no more sponsors. Her name quietly disappeared from the sport. No formal suspension. Just doors closing one by one. For decades, her story faded, buried, under newer names, brighter lights, and the silence that follows those who speak up before the world is ready to listen. Until now. Now, the world couldn't stop listening. Former fans from her hometown reached out. Old trainers messaged her with tears in their eyes. Young women from across the country sent thank you letters, calling her an inspiration. She was invited to appear on sports talk shows, podcasts, and women's leadership panels. One female fight camp in Arizona offered her a position as head trainer. Another asked her to guest coach their teenage girls program. And Lena? She didn't rush toward the cameras. She didn't dress up her story. She just told the truth. She spoke with calm, steady words. She said she never wanted revenge, just to be heard again. Her message was simple. Fighting doesn't stop when the world stops watching. It stops when you give up on yourself. And I never did. Across the internet, fans called her the ghost of the ring. But to a new generation of fighters, she became something more. proof that it's never too late to fight for who you are. Back at Iron House Gym, everything had changed. No one mocked her now. No one questioned her place on the mat. And one afternoon, Coach Diego took a ladder, climbed to the top of the back wall, where all the framed photos of fighters were hung, and added one more, a fresh, color photo of Lena, standing over Chase in the ring, gloves still raised mid-hook. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Lena Mae Carter, the fighter who was never finished." And in the very gym where they once laughed, her name now hung from the wall, etched into history, right where it always belonged. The Champions Wall 1 month later, Iron House looked different. The walls hadn't changed. The bags still swung from their chains. The air still smelled like sweat and chalk. But something deeper had shifted. The attitude. The energy. The silence that once followed Lena around had turned into something else. Respect. That day, the gym held a special event. There was no ringing bell, no fight cards, no loud music or taunts. Just a group of people, members, coaches, even a few locals who had never set foot inside, gathered near the back wall. That was the wall where Iron House honored its champions. Dozens of black and white photos lined the space. Fighters from years past, frozen mid-punch or with arms raised in victory. Most of them were men. All of them were young, until now. Coach Diego stood on a small step stool, carefully pressing a new frame onto an open spot at the top center. It was a full-color photo. Sharp, clean. Lena Mae Carter stood in the ring, gloves still raised, her expression calm and timeless. In the background, Chase sat on the mat, dazed, the crowd behind him frozen in disbelief. Under the photo was a bronze plaque. It read, "Lena Mae Carter, the fighter who was never finished." Strength is not measured by age, but by how many times, you stand back up. The room clapped softly. No one cheered. No one shouted. Because this wasn't about celebration. It was about recognition, about something long overdue. Lena stood near the back, arms crossed lightly, watching as her photo joined. The others, she didn't smile widely. She just nodded slowly like someone who had finally been heard after a lifetime of silence. Across the room, Chase was shadowboxing quietly in a corner. No camera crew, no crowd. Just him and his thoughts. He wasn't the same anymore. The knockout hadn't just hit his body. It had hit his ego. But maybe, for the first time, that wasn't such a bad thing. He is now trained in silence. He now listened more. He even nodded at Lena when they passed each other, something he never would have done weeks earlier. Lena didn't gloat. She never brought it up. She didn't need to. Some lessons land better when they're unspoken. As the tribute continued, she walked toward the ring where a young girl, maybe 12, maybe 13, was slipping on a pair of fresh red gloves. Her braids bounced with nervous energy. Her eyes scanned the gym like she was looking for someone to tell her she didn't belong. Instead, she found Lena standing beside her. Lena held the ropes open and helped her step through. Then she climbed in behind her, bent down, and adjusted the girl's stance, just like someone had once done for her. Step by step, drill by drill. No crowd watching, no camera in sight, just one generation handing the gloves to the next. The girl threw her first jab. Lena nodded once, and somewhere behind them, her photo on the wall caught the light just right. They tried to humiliate a forgotten fighter, but she rose from the silence with one punch that echoed through history.